let go and surrender into this idea that there is a happily ever after, or that it's only going to be great happiness. And if you can accept the fact that actually life and happiness comes from the ups, the downs, the grief, the love, the joy, like that is the experience of life, and that there's beauty in all of it.
Hello, Abby. Great to meet you, and thank you so much for coming to this podcast.
It's lovely to meet you, Lorna, and thank you for having me today.
Wonderful to have you. So, this podcast is called Awakening Now. And it's all about awakening. You know, people have different ideas what it is, what they awake from, what happens. So, would you like to give your definition so we know we're on the same page, so we know what we're talking about?
Yeah, for sure. So, from my experience and um, based on my understanding, I like to think of awakening of bringing awareness into the unconscious. So, things that we're unconscious about. And that allows us to just really look into the past and to heal from the past and look at our experiences to clear the path for the future. Um, and for me, it's been like a zooming out on what's in our direct experience and what's in front of us, to create that awareness and understanding of our own lives and who we are as people and how we relate to other people and ourselves.
Oh, that's beautiful. I agree. Yeah.
Great.
And did you have some kind of grand awakening experience, or was it gradual? How was it in your life?
I think it wasn't a gradual process. I think it's something that I came to as a result of being unconscious for so long. I don't know if you've ever heard of the saying about the feather, the brick, and the truck. That the universe gives you whispers, and if you don't listen to them, so that's like the feather, it'll get louder and it'll be like the bricks hit you. And again, if you don't listen to that, it'll be like a truck hits you. So I feel like for me, I only really had an awakening and started to kind of look under the surface when I got down towards the kind of maybe the brick and the truck phase. And just to kind of give a bit of context, I'll go back to
Mm-hmm.
childhood and where it all started. And I faced a lot of childhood trauma, and that really put a strain on my relationship with my mum. And so we moved up to a different part of the UK when I was quite young to move from domestic violence. And what I would say is that I think my mum had a lot of her own traumas, and that caused a lot of strain in our relationship when we moved up into Newcastle in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, it was a really quite fractured relationship, and going into adulthood, it was really hard to have a relationship, and we parted ways like we weren't speaking. And in life, I'd never really dealt with the traumas of my childhood,
Mm-hmm.
but I
Mm-hmm.
was doing well because I'd adopted the approach that we're taught in terms of mindset, change your mindset, change your life. And I got into personal development, and I was doing really well, and I had really good results, and that's kind of how I was operating.
Mm-hmm.
But then I lost my mum. So my mum passed away in 2018, and that was sudden. And all of a sudden, all those issues from childhood came to the surface. And because we weren't speaking, that was really complex grief. And for many years, I demonized myself after. So I was dealing with this complex grief. And because of all the things under the surface I wasn't dealing with and facing, and because I'd adopted this mindset approach, eventually I ran out of steam, and then my
Mm-hmm.
health declined. And then when my health declined, I had I didn't have my physical health, and then all the issues that I was kind of suppressing came to the surface. So I had this really difficult challenge and period where I was just dealing with all the grief, all the trauma, and I didn't have the health. And I was basically forced into a place where I had to start facing and healing. It was kind of the only way forward at that point. Um, and before then, I'd maybe tried traditional therapies, and I'd never really tried medication, but exercise and all the other great things that can help us look after our well-being. But then I discovered breath work for the first time, and it was a somatic breath work. And it was the first time I had a release of trauma, a release of kind of stress and depression. And it really got my attention because I was like, what is this? I wanted to know more. And I started looking into somatic therapy, and I ended up working with a coach who teaches somatic therapy, nervous system regulation work. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey into awakening, and like what a journey it's been. So at this point, do you want me to continue, or is there some further questions you'd like me to answer?
Well, I just want to say that I'm so sorry that you had to go through all this horrible experience. Like listening to you, my heart is like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was something again that I've learned from going through these experiences is that sometimes we have to go through them to kind of go on to a new direction and a new path. And like I say, having the ability to zoom out and to look at my life from a higher perspective has made me realize actually and understand cause and effect a lot more. And there were things that were going on in my life, and some of them were really big and really challenging. But I was able to then kind of rewind back and look at actually some of the ways that I was contributing, and some of the ways that my actions unconsciously were creating some situations and scenarios that were then playing out as these bigger, wider things. So that's kind of been the beauty of the healing work that's gone into it. It hasn't been a bypass. I've had to feel every single emotion, every single up and ride the wave. Sorry, I feel every single up and down and ride the wave to get to that place of healing, to get to that place of awareness and then awakening. So it's been like a layered journey that you have to stop at every single stop and feel every single emotion. And when you do, that's when you get to the other side and experience the beauty of healing and the beauty of kind of awakening and awareness and consciousness.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I agree, there is so much bypassing going on. Like people are trying to awaken or have some kind of realization or recognition so that they don't need to feel that every emotion that is still repressed or hidden.
Yeah.
And then they find the ways to deny the experience. Well, but the truck is coming. That's the good news.
For sure, that the truck comes, like it eventually will come out in some way, shape, or form. You will have it presented to you in a way that it means that you will have to face them eventually. And that is a big lesson that I've learned in this journey.
Right. Me too. I call it a cosmic washing machine, Some
I love that, yeah.
come in and everything's so intense and you just have to face head on and just look at it. And it takes time to heal and see all these patterns. Yeah, but life is the best teacher, I think.
Yeah, and that's how we grow. Like I think the biggest growth and the biggest lessons have come from facing that which I've been avoiding, or that which feels like it's going to be too much, and going into the places that we don't really want to go into. Like that's been where the most growth and the biggest lessons, like going into those places. You might not want to do it, but actually what's on the other side of that is just, yeah, it's so worth it.
Oh, I love that you said that. It's like seeking the places out that we most avoid. We don't want to look, don't want to feel. And that opens up the biggest freedom.
It reminds me of that beautiful quote by Joseph Campbell when he talks about the cave we fear to enter holds the treasure that we seek. That quote is something that I've always kind of captured my attention, and it's something that I always bring to mind when I know like I'm gonna have to go through this difficult period, or I'm gonna have to face this difficult thing. Because it's like actually when you do that, there's the treasure on the other side of going through those difficult dark caves.
Mm. Sweet. And what do you do now? How is your life changed now? What's your experience? You know, having had that healing experience, what's the other side?
So the transformation. So yeah, just to take you back kind of where we left off and the point where I got into coaching, and my coach taught me some amazing tools and skills. So the first thing was the nervous system regulation work. And that helped me just calm that reactivity and step away from triggers. It really helped me to do that zooming out on my life. And from there, we did a lot of attachment work. So we're working on those wounds from childhood. And when we face some of our deepest pains and fears, that can be really triggering. It can bring up so much. It can just really throw you off.
Mm-hmm.
But the nervous system regulation work just helped me to go into those places without it becoming debilitating. But helped me to regulate my emotions and take me back to a place of just inner safety. So when I started to do that work, that's when I really started to heal, because I was able to go back and heal the wounds from childhood. But in a way that meant I could still go about my daily life. So that's when I started to first notice healing and transformation.
Mm-hmm.
And that internal safety is something that is a big part of our development when we look at models of the integral theory and stages of psychological development. That's why we start to see that growth, because if we have wounds in childhood, we can sometimes become stuck in that stage of development. So I saw immense growth just from doing that alone. And then I went and did a plant medicine ceremony at that point. So I went to an ayahuasca retreat, which was run by my coach. So at the point I went into the retreat and did the plant medicine, I was already at a really great stage of healing and had
Mm-hmm.
a good level of consciousness and was able to hold bigger experiences. And yeah, it's quite a big thing to do. And I wasn't sure what it was going to be like. And I remember just thinking, you can be facing all your traumas and all your fears, but because I'd had the tools and the skills to just regulate, and I'd already faced a lot of my traumas and pain. So I was like, right, yeah, let's go for this. So I went to a beautiful retreat, and it was in Costa Rica.
Oh,
And
nice.
it was beautiful. And I was with a group of people that we did a preparation work with as well.
Uh-huh.
And within that, we set our intentions. And for me, the intention that I really wanted to get from the ceremony was to actually unlearn everything that wasn't me. Because I
Oh,
felt like,
powerful.
yeah, I thought so much had happened in my life that I wasn't sure anymore, like what was me, what
Mm-hmm.
wasn't me, what was mine, what wasn't mine. I just really wanted that clarity. And I suppose the first lesson that I learned was about surrender. Was when you take ayahuasca with the Colombian family. They don't allow women who are having a period, they call it the moon, to drink ayahuasca, because they say it's already a powerful ceremony that you're having. And as I was traveling to Costa Rica, I got my moon, my period. So that meant actually I might not be able to have a ceremony. It's something I've been preparing for a long time, and I've flown out here, and actually that might not happen now. And at first I went to the mindset of like, right, yeah, it doesn't matter, you're here, it's great. And then I just realized that that's still a bypass, and I had to feel the emotions of being upset about that. And once I allowed myself to be upset, it passed. And it was like, right, okay, I'm here and I'm accepting of what's going to happen. And then the night before the ceremony, I was clear and my period stopped. So like the first lesson for me, and probably the lesson that I still take with me forward, is about just surrendering and accepting instead of grasping and trying to control outcomes. So I went to my first ceremony, and I remember I had my first glass of ayahuasca and we were sitting in a sacred silence. It's a 2 hour silence in the darkness in the jungle with just candlelight, and nothing was happening. And I was thinking, okay, maybe this isn't for me. It's not going to work for me. Maybe, there's something wrong with me. Around 2 hours later, I had my second glass and I was thinking again, okay, maybe nothing's going to happen. And I think I eventually got to the point where I was like, right, I'm going to go to sleep. I'm a bit tired and nothing's happening. And then at that point, again, that's when my journey began. And the way it unfolded was just so beautiful and stunning, hard and difficult and challenging.
Mm-hmm.
But what it did was it just took me back down my ancestry, and it showed me that essentially the generational trauma in my family had come back from my great grandfather and his experiences in the war. And essentially, what I thought was a mother wound and having the issues with my mother was actually a great grandfather wound. It had come back through my great grandfather because of the war, and that was kind of what was coming through my family line. And within my journey, I got my grandfather healing. So I had a ceremony within my own journey for my grandfather to heal. And when we reached that point of healing, I was moving up to my family line, and it was healing all the people in my ancestry until I reached the point of my mum. And then it moved to the point where I was the one receiving the healing.
Mm-hmm.
And this was probably the most profound and beautiful part of the journey. And it was like almost like the only way I can describe it was like I was sitting inside a feather. It was just so soft and pure and beautiful. And I knew that I was just surrounded by this. It felt like this maternal love, the love of my mom. And it felt like every wound, every unmet need, every kind of pain from my childhood was just being completely loved from my mom. And I remember I was just sitting and the tears were just flowing. And it wasn't out of tears it was just so beautiful and just a letting go. And I remember at that point, that's when, they talk about an ayahuasca, like you purge. And at that point, that's when I was sick. But it felt like a letting go. It came from like the root chakra, from deep down within, the root chakra where our family lines lie. And I just felt this release, like I'd let go of all the trauma from childhood. And it just, yeah, it was just this clear channel. And after that point, my journey went on, and it was the rest of the ceremony was beautiful. The second night, I was so exhausted from the first night. I didn't really want to go too deep, so it was a very different experience. It was more about energy and the interconnectedness and nature. It didn't really go deeply emotional. It was kind of the bittersweet, and that was my journey in Costa Rica. And we did a lot of yoga, and we did a lot of breath work and energy work, and I was with an amazing group of people. And then I've been from there, it's been the integration work of coming home and really knowing myself and really learning myself, and knowing that from this point, I've got a lot of changes to make. I definitely got my intention, like that definitely played out. And I realized actually the real me and who I am without all these things like that have happened in my life. I'm actually a very different person to the decisions that the girl before the ceremony was making. So I found myself embedded in a life that actually I realized I've got a lot of changes to make, a lot of big changes in terms of like my career and relationships. And I have a business now, so I left a career. I have a business now, a coaching business, in which I teach the skills in nervous system regulation and the attachment work and the coaching work that I once learned. I did those qualifications that I can teach them to other people. And that feels so aligned. Like I love that so much. And I think the transformation has just continued from there, in terms of there's definitely parts of my nervous system that are healed. There's parts of, my attachment system and my relationships that are healing. And yes, like it's an ongoing journey. There's always new layers of healing to face. But just the healing that I got from that time in my life has just been like the biggest awakening of actually what life is about. And it's just reminded me about the beauty of life. And I think there's nothing more beautiful than just becoming yourself and be able to express from that place and then using your experience to help other people do the same.
Delightful.
Mm.
I completely hear you because I had my own share of plant medicines and not just that. So I hear you, and yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing when we open to that life shows the different aspects that the mind in its normal state cannot even imagine. So for somebody listening who never had any ayahuasca, magic mushrooms, or anything like that, this is maybe an interesting story or something, like it's in your imagination. But the truth is, there's so much more to life than this little mind can imagine. And we don't know that until we know, until it's shown. Until it's shown.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had also a ayahuasca experience, and well, it taught me two major things. One thing, that everyone is my teacher. Like, I'm not here to teach anyone. Like, don't look at me. I'm here to learn from everyone. Every person I meet, every situation I meet, every cat I meet is my teacher. That was beautiful. And the other one, that is, we are here to breathe. Head up. Breathe in. Breathe up. That's all. Everything else is unfolding. Everything else is just like when you surrender, you see that flow, you experience that flow, but it's not that fighting or righteousness or needing it to be a certain way. So there is openness through that breath, just being open.
And I think that kind of ties back in with what I was talking about in the lesson of surrender. And it can be difficult to let go and surrender. I think we often try and seek to protect ourselves by grasping and wanting a certain outcome and trying to move our lives into a certain direction. But there's also a beauty in sometimes just saying, yeah, like I feel that fear, I feel that need to grasp, and just saying, and I'm gonna still just let go and allow myself to be guided, because I know that I've been okay and I will always be okay. Like I've always been held, and just letting things unfold. There is a beauty in that as well.
Powerful. I'm curious about this nervous system regulation work that you are doing. Like, could you teach me and the audience or whoever is listening something simple, maybe?
Yeah, for sure.
Be applicable in practical way.
Yes, so this is something I'm absolutely passionate about, so I could talk about it all day long because it's just been so transformational for me, and it's something that I feel like if everyone just knew basic levels of nervous system regulation work, like the world would definitely experience so much more better health and mental health. And it's something that definitely works in layers. So just on the most basic layer, if I was teaching a client who was completely new to nervous system regulation work, is that there's just three main pathways of the nervous system. And we actually are familiar with fight or flight. Most of us are familiar with the stress state. So that's one of them. The second is like a disconnection. So it's almost the opposite to being in fight or flight. Sometimes when we feel withdrawn. But there's also a third, and this is what the polyvagal theory, the nervous system regulation work that I use, is focused on, and it's the connection, like so the green safety state, the mammalian part of the nervous system that brings us back to a place of safety. And to do this, it's really simple. What I would do is I would get someone to bring to mind a memory. And you can do this, you can close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or you can keep them open and just bring to mind a memory of a time you felt deeply safe and deeply connected. That sometimes for people is when they've been with pets, a family member, being in a beautiful place on a beach, just in a group of people where they felt really like a group of friends where they just feel so held. And then what I get them to do is to feel the physical sensations in the body that are connected with safety. And then when you start to bring your awareness to those physical sensations, that's how you deepen it. So you deepen through the senses. So you could really bring online the image of being on a beach. Like, how did it make you feel in your nervous system? Can you remember how bright the sunshine was, how the open space made you feel? And you start then just feeling in the nervous system what the physical sensations of the body that are linked to that internal safety for you are. And then once you've done that, we'll bring them back to a neutral place. And then I always preface the next few bits by saying, don't pick your most stressful or your most difficult moments. Pick something that's relatively stressful, but it's not triggering. So don't go into your deepest stress. Just go into something like, I don't know, it could be stressful that a delivery's late. And then I would get them to then go into that place of bring that experience to mind, that memory that's making you feel stressed. So your delivery's late and that's going to potentially impact on your day. And then just start experiencing what that stress feels like in the body physically. So I know for me that I always feel like jittery and I always feel like my breathing starts to increase and I feel a tightness in my chest. And we start to then put those physical sensations that we link to stress into the body. And then we'll bring them back to that green, to regulate back to that green place of like, bring that memory back to mind, that beautiful green connected memory that brings back safety. And then you start to get a regulation back to that green. And then again, we do the same with the disconnection. And I'm mentioning colors here, and that's a very easy way that we identify the states. So green, safety connection, yellow is stress, and then red for disconnection. So we'll take them into, so the red is where we feel withdrawn, we feel avoidant, like we're holding back, and we'll go into ourselves. Again, bring that memory online and start to feel those physical sensations. And then we come out of it and go back to that green. So we work with very basic stresses and very basic disconnected memories whilst we're strengthening the green. We obviously want to go as deep into that. And that just basically plots the three parts of the nervous system within our bodies and within our mind. And that's very basic. And then from there, we can start going into the more stressful situations, situations that make us feel, more withdrawn, and that can kind of go into ourselves a little bit more. Once we strengthen that muscle to go back to that green safety and connection. And again, there's layers to that. And then the skillful part is then when we go out into our daily lives and we face daily triggers, and it's then applying those skills into our direct experience. So that it's kind of a layering. So the first is just having that awareness of, okay, this is what stress feels like in my body. This is what it feels like when I'm disconnected and withdrawn. And this is actually what safety feels like. And this is how I get back to safety. And then I can increase the intensity of that by going, right, okay, this is a little bit more challenging. Let's see if I can regulate back to green. And then when we become more proficient and good at that, it's like, right, in my daily life, when I'm in this experience and I'm facing this thing right in front of me, this is how I apply those skills. And I come back to green and I can apply this nervous system regulation so that I'm showing up into my life, into my daily life and my interactions with others from this green, safe, connected place where our decision making is online and we're not coming from a place of being triggered and reacting. We get a chance to respond.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's very interesting. It's like rewiring your nervous system, strengthening the green and recognizing the red and the yellow and whatever else.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think
because
from there, like that's where we really learn about what things are triggering us. And instead of then reacting to the trigger, which still might happen, it still happens. It's just then sometimes you have the tool to bring that back to a safe place and a connected place. But we start to learn about actually what our triggers are, and we can start looking a little bit deeper under the surface from a regulated place, and that's when this healing and growth can happen from that point.
Beautiful. I think one of the biggest and most useful things I realized it was that it is safe to feel. It's safe to feel. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, you're not gonna explode or you're not gonna die because you feel something intensely. It's completely safe to feel.
Yeah, I think emotions are like the human experience. Like they're here to teach us a lesson, and by going into my emotions and allowing myself to feel, that's kind of what brings the color to life.
Yeah. The richness, the juiciness, the delight, the depth.
The depth, for sure. As we talk about expansion and growth so much, but actually there's also so much beauty in a deepening and depth too. I think being able to hold the depth with the growth and expansion has led to growth, transformation, and essentially that's how we raise our consciousness. When we do have plant medicine experiences, they show us these higher states of consciousness. But to be able to hold them and integrate them, it comes from that deepening of like being able to really ground in your emotions so that we can expand and hold those experiences. It's like a polarity that we need to hold both.
Like expanding the spectrum, I don't even know the word, expanding the possibility to feel both ends. The high is high, the low is low, no in between. Like getting your internet upgraded.
Yeah, it's like a software upgrade. That's what my coach always says. We're just upgrading your software, and I always love that. It's like, yeah.
Being able to handle more of energy passing through. Yeah. What fascinates me is that, you know, when we sit a little bit, just a few minutes in silence, not doing anything, not grasping, just here. There's always something here that wants to be felt. There's always something here that, you know, it can be a physical sensation like a contraction or pain, or it can be an emotional thing. But there's always here something that wants to be felt. And it's nice if it's bliss. I love that.
Yeah.
But yeah, when the attention is turned into silence or into just being, there's always something here.
I think that silence allows that inner voice to be heard, the voice of the intuition and those inner senses. Like that voice is heard in the silence. And that voice it's essentially our consciousness. And it's the voice that can tell us, you know, what you're doing at the moment isn't the most healthy for you, or you need to do more of this in your life. It's the guidance, and yet we don't often provide it with the silence that it needs to guide us. So I found like just sitting in that silence has allowed for that intuition to really flourish and to grow. And I find that I get a lot of creative ideas in the place of silence. It's really been something that I've learned coming back off retreat, is to create more silence, because actually that's it. It isn't really silence. It's space in which you're allowing yourself to both process and to grow, and to have that internal voice to guide and grow and to heal us. And to have that creative flow coming through, the creative flow of energy.
Juicy. Yeah, but it takes some work to get to that quiet place.
Mm.
And there is
Yeah.
no magic pill. I mean, okay, there is ayahuasca, but one ayahuasca is not gonna help it.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
And I
it
think
depends
there's
on where you are on where you are in the journey, where you are in the journey of quieting all the painful bits.
Yeah, I think, and just to address, it's a really great point you've touched on, that plant medicine isn't like a quick fix pill. It's not you go once and like you will have an experience. But it's the work I did beforehand and the place that I went into that experience that probably made it so profound. Like I have no doubt that I would have had a great, like a powerful experience from it. But I think the level of transformation I received came from the work that I put in beforehand. It was like an accelerant on the work that I'd already done and complemented everything that I'd already done. And to be able to experience the silence has actually come from the nervous system work that I've done, because it's creating safety within the nervous system, which is actually quieting the mind.
Yeah.
So that took time and effort and allow myself to feel and to go into my daily life and just look at how I was living and how I was showing up and how I was interacting with other people. And making it a conscious effort to bring these tools and techniques in until they became ingrained, until they became habitual. And now I don't have to think about them. Sometimes I have to apply them into some situations that are more challenging, but it essentially it gets to a point where it becomes like you have those neural pathways. It becomes like a rewiring, like you were saying before. So it does pay off down the line.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Mm.
And can you tell a little bit about your work? Like who comes to see you? What's going on there? It's the biggest challenge for people at the moment. I'm curious.
Mm. So people that come to see me, so I love supporting people that I suppose were similar to the person that I used to be. In that there's a lot of healing to do from the past, but you don't quite know where to start, and it seems like this really big, scary task. And at the same time, you know that it's starting to show up and influence your life in negative ways. And you're kind of reaching a point, they're kind of reaching a point where it's time to start looking at the past and start healing from the past and doing the work to basically grow and transform. And I take them through a process of, I think the first thing it's healing, it's learning the nervous system regulation work, it's learning the attachment work, so we can identify those experiences from childhood that are showing up in our development and are showing up in our day-to-day life, that we need to start then going back, looking at healing and doing some regulation work. That then helps us to clear the path for the future. So we're just then able to work out who we are. So then that moves into a phase of working on self-expression, identity, and working out who we truly are, and who we are, and what it is that we want to do in the work, and our purpose, and the decisions that we make from this place of healing, as opposed to a place of fear and trauma. And then that moves into a phase of, okay, so how do we apply this into our lives? How do we then move this healing into an action phase of going then out into the world and putting these into place and living our purpose and our dreams. So then it's like a full kind of embodied and integrated approach. So we've healed from the past. We've identified who we are, how to express ourselves and what it is that we actually want. And then we move into a place of then putting that into action. So we start living that embodied life. And it's based on the foundations of the somatic therapy and the nervous system regulation work that's been really incredibly profound for me. It's then shown other people actually these tools and skills can support you, not just in a coaching container, but for the rest of your life.
Do you recommend to go to have a ayahuasca retreat?
So yeah, that's really interesting. So what I would say is that you definitely know when it's for you, you get the calling. So what I say to people is that you will know if it's for you and when the time is right, because it was something I knew about for many years, but I always was a flat out no. Like I always said I'd love to do it, but I wouldn't. And then there I was 5 years later because of the way my life had kind of played out. And I knew I was an absolute 100% yes at that point. So what I always say to people is that you will know when you've got the call in and then when it's time. So I often say I wouldn't recommend it per se in terms of I wouldn't say if it's for you to do or not because you will know like intuitively. But what I do say is that I can share my experience with you and how it's had that impact and the profound impact and change and transformation in my life. So you can use that to inform your own decision, but also knowing the fact that everyone's experience will be unique to them. And as they say with the medicine, you will get what you need from it, not what you want.
I agree. Yeah. And there are so many tourists now, like spiritual tourists, like, oh, ayahuasca, oh, magic mushrooms, let's go have some of that. Let's go. Let's have an experience. But I mean, the experience comes and goes. So what it showed you some deep and meaningful stuff. If you don't come home and integrate that and bring it into your everyday life, it's just another glimpse, an experience. And then it's not enough. I need some more and maybe more. And what else is there? So these spiritual tourists that are just chasing experiences, like running on a surface, not savoring the depths of it and not even recognizing that there is a lot of work to do after.
There's an entire integration period that I found that was probably the most challenging part, is coming home into the life that you had before and trying to basically balance the two and come to the place of integration in the middle ground. I will say that actually using quantum physics really helped me with this, the understanding of energy and how it relates to consciousness and how it relates to the stages of like integral theory, and actually knowing that the lowest and highest vibrations will eventually come to the center, and that's essentially how we then grow in our own consciousness. That really helped me to kind of keep up practices like yoga, breath work, knowing that essentially it was going to raise my baseline energy on a day-to-day basis. And when I did reach that middle ground, it was still going to be at a higher level than what I was before. And that has been really helpful through the integration period, is just to keep myself grounded and doing spiritual practices that just bring me down to a really good level of being grounded and just being in a good frequency and good energy. And just another interesting point that you raised about the experience and the spiritual tourism, the ayahuasca, was that I wasn't to go back until I had made all the changes and I knew what they were. I knew I had to change my job. One of those things that I want to start to travel with my job, having an online coaching business. And it was like, you know what you need to do. You've been given all the healing that you need for these next stages in your life. If you come back before then, it will be a bypass because you have everything you need. You know what you need to do. So at present, I know I don't have a calling to go back, and I know actually what I need to do is to put those action pieces into play, because that is the true integration of the lessons from that ceremony. So only at that point, when I have made all those changes and I'm embodying the lessons and the transformation that I've been shown and given, at that point, I might consider it again if I have the calling.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, what a trip this life is. With and without
sure.
plant medicines, it doesn't have to come in. It's everyone's individual experience. That's fine. So yeah, what a trip.
Yeah, for sure.
And people are listening, perhaps, who are looking for awakening, looking for that magical state of happy ever after, looking for that experience, or even looking to end the seeking or end the suffering. There's so many ways to describe it. It's the same thing, it's just looking for something else. What is your advice? What is your best advice for these people?
So yeah, just to talk into that a little bit, I think the first thing I would say is to let go and surrender into this idea that there is a happily ever after, or that it's only going to be great happiness. And if you can accept the fact that actually life and happiness comes from the ups, the downs, the grief, the love, the joy, like that is the experience of life, and that there's beauty in all of it. That's kind of that would be the first bit of advice that I would give. So that's kind of a more we can understand that on a conceptual level, but I suppose it needs to be experiential. So we need to be able to start experiencing that to fully appreciate it, because we can say, yeah, well, that's easy for you to say, but I'm going through intense grief. Like if someone had said that to me when I was going through the intense grief of losing my mom, in that moment, that wouldn't have felt good for me. But being on the other end of it, of actually, yes, because it's that zooming out again of, yes, I'm feeling this intense grief now, but actually that grief led me on the biggest transformational awakening journey of my life. It turned out to be beautiful, but that's two ends of the spectrum, like that's the polarity of that experience. So being able to hold both, so having an appreciation that when something's challenging and difficult, that it will also be the polar opposite experience of that, and that's how we find that beauty within our experiences. But then to talk into that also from an experiential part of how do we start then that journey, because I also went on a journey. I didn't just reach this place. I found body-based healing and getting onto like the somatic therapy. For me, that was the thing that took me out of my mind and out of my emotions and experiences, and just started being able to ground myself. I found that through breath work and meditation. So definitely finding a practice that feels aligned to who you are. So some people might not have that connection to breath work or meditation, but it might be yoga, it might be qigong, it might be something else. But finding that one practice that can actually, it's almost bring you back to yourself, or find that true essence of who you are. That's kind of a really good starting point, because what you want to do is to just be able to come back to who you are, get that real sense of who you are. And then from that stage, for me, to get to transformation and awakening and consciousness, it's all about looking at what came before, healing from the past to clear that path for the future. And then what I've learned from my plant medicine journey is having that wider understanding of actually what's been my family experience and my ancestors' experience, because generational trauma, also influences us in ways that we might not imagine or be aware of. So it's just having that wider perspective of what are the things that my parents, grandparents, and so forth. And it's that, again, that wider perspective of what's influencing us in our lives. And once we have that wider perspective of ourselves and we have that practice that allows us to ground back into who we truly are, and then we look for tools and like nervous system regulation or the somatic therapy tools to help us to expand our own kind of awareness. That's when we start bringing light into what's unconscious. And when we bring light into what's unconscious and we bring awareness to it, it becomes conscious. And that's how we expand our consciousness and have an awakening from my experience.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. Yes. And hopefully somebody listening that find their own way.
Yeah.
And how can people reach you if they want to work with you?
So I am on Instagram. I run my coaching business from Instagram. So it is Abby with an IE _Louisa_Westgate. Happy if anyone wants to reach out to talk about, their experience or any queries around nervous system regulation work, please just drop me a message, and happy to have a conversation with anyone who is curious or wants to share their experience. Already love to hear from people who might have something different to offer me, like what you were saying at the beginning of being not a teacher, but also learning from other people too. So if somebody has something that they think that I would also benefit from hearing or knowing about, like, please introduce me as well.
Oh, that's so wonderful. Thank you so much. I will put the links in the description and people can find you.
Lovely. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's just been so good to come on and talk about my experiences, and hopefully there's people who can relate, or it can help them or benefit them if they've learned something in a small way.
Well, thank you so much, Abby. It's such a pleasure to meet you and to have you here.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing. Wonderful.
Take care.
And thank you everyone for listening. Till next time. Bye for now.